Hey, welcome back to Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee. We are Zooming today because our guest today is not from the Southern Illinois area, but he is close. He's from Western Kentucky, and he has an amazing story. He's had a tremendous impact on so many people nationwide in the business of coaching, especially offensive side of the ball. And I know the impact he had on my career, and I can't wait to share his story with you today. I want to thank Swinford Media. I want to thank Ross and Abby for their editing and their producing of this. I want to thank them also for their wedding videography that they do. And if you have a wedding or something coming up or friends that do and you want it videoed, they'll take great care of you. I want to thank my buddies at Adrenaline Fundraising, Jeff Scott and Matt. They're great guys. They do a tremendous job of helping you raise money. That's not a fun thing for most coaches. That's not their favorite part of coaching is fundraising, but they make it easy and they are really, really good at what they do, no matter the size of your program or the level. I want to thank my buddies at Marion Plumbing and Tony Gooch for all your plumbing needs. Go see those guys. Tony's the best. Part of my chain crew for years. His son was a tremendous player for me, and now he's supporting this podcast and helping us kind of shed light on the lives of coaches, pull back the curtain, let you see who they are as people, not just win-loss records and sound bites. And again, as always, appreciate your feedback and your support of this podcast. My guest today is a legend in the game of football from high school to college to pro. His name is Tony Franklin. He is a mentor of mine. He helped transform and save what I think was my career at a very crucial time. Coach Franklin, welcome.
Hey, Kerry, good to hear from you, man. And I appreciate the introduction. And I think that hopefully your listeners know how valuable you have been in this industry, one of the best humans I've ever known, and as well as being a great football coach. So I really appreciate it and glad to be on.
Well, thank you, Coach. And I'm gonna run through a bio to kind of let my viewers know more about you. I'm sure the name is familiar for a lot of our viewers, but I want them to know if you can make any corrections, or I pull a lot of this off the internet. Much of it I knew, but I want to make sure it's accurate. You were a high school football coach. I believe you coached at Murray and you coached as an assistant at Mayfield. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was a high school coach for 16 years. Started in 1979 at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky, as just a student teacher assistant, and then went to Owensboro Catholic to Davis County. Back to Murray High. I was the youngest head coach in the state at 25. And I went back to Davis County. I was at Callaway County. And then I was at Mayfield and then the head coach at Mercer County. And then in 1997, got into college football at the University of Kentucky.
Perfect. University of Kentucky, you're part of one of the most prolific offensive staffs in the country. Second best offense nationally, 11th in total offense. Back-to-back bowl appearances while you were there, including their first New Year's Day bowl game in 50 years. Post-Kentucky, which we'll talk about this as our main focus today, you started shortly after you were done at Kentucky, you started the Tony Franklin offensive system. We're going to get into that and its history and why it mattered so much. You then were at Troy University. You were at Auburn University, Middle Tennessee State, Louisiana Tech, and at each of these stops, Coach, their offenses went straight to conference number one in passing and passing yardage and efficiency. Every stop along the way, your quarterbacks were becoming the player of the year or first team all conference. And again, it's almost a separate podcast to talk about your success at the college level, but I want people to know it. Then you end up at Cal, where you coached Jared Goff. I remember him as a freshman, and you were the offensive coordinator, and watching him become the number one draft pick. You transformed that offense, and then, of course, you end up back at Middle Tennessee, and now you're now, after a brief retirement, I guess you could call it some kind of retirement, kind of like mine. It doesn't feel like retirement, but you end up back at Louisiana Tech, where you currently are. You played or coached in 9 bowl games. I think that's what it said. Major bowls like Outback, Music City, Chick-fil-A, Armed Forces, Hawaii, and the Camellia Bowls. And you've also coached indoor league football, the Lexington Horsemen. You have authored two books, Fourth Down and a Life to Go, published in 2001, Victor's Victory in 2005, about AED advocacy and having those at schools near the field, near athletic venues where people can access those to save a life. You also have done a podcast host. Coach, you've done a lot of amazing things in your lifetime. And I just want to thank you for being here today and allowing me to talk to you and talk about your career and the impact you've had. So welcome again. And let's talk about, first of all, just real briefly, what's your hometown?
Princeton, Kentucky. I lived there up until I was 18 years old and went to Murray State University and lived back in Princeton one other brief period of time for just a couple of months in between my entrepreneurial experiences, the many failures, and trying to become a businessman before finally figuring some of it out as time went by. But yeah, Princeton still home to me, and I go back whenever I get an opportunity and spend some time with my brother and my father.
That's great, Coach. And obviously you were a high school athlete. You were a football player. What position was Tony Franklin in high school?
I was a running back and a linebacker. I was like most small school athletes. I played everything. I punted, I kicked extra points, I covered kicks, was on every special team. I thought they were mad at me if I didn't play every single play. And so I always said I thought I was a really good football player until I started coaching college football, and then I figured out I probably wasn't very good. I know I would not have recruited me.
Yeah, those realizations as you get older.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you're like, I wasn't nearly as good as I thought I was going to be. But so when did you know, Coach? Like I ask this question a lot of my guests because the coaching bug can hit people really early. Some guys know when they're growing up and they're in high school, they say, man, I knew I was going to be a coach. I can't believe I didn't know that, but I didn't know it till a little bit later. How about for you? When did you say to yourself, coaching is going to be my thing?
I don't really think it became that until I kind of thought I was going to be to go to law school, and my father had kind of always said to me, I don't really, you do what you want to do as long as you don't become a teacher and a coach. Because he was an educator, had been a coach for about 7 years, that coached basketball, never coached football, and then became an administrator. And so I always thought, well, I want to please my dad, so I think I'll be a lawyer. And I was in college, and I just knew that I didn't want to go to college anymore. I didn't want to continue going to school. And so somewhere along the way, I decided that, I would help the local high school there and become a teacher. And I coached, I guess, for the first time outside of Powder Puff high school football when I was a junior in high school. Outside of that, coaching at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky, I think it was probably having two guys on that staff that embraced me. And I remember the first time they used the words and they called me coach. And I thought how unique that felt. And those guys were fun to be around. And I just kind of think that maybe wanted to be a part of the gang. And feeling that I think, getting outside of a team framework is really unique, that you don't really know how much you miss it until you're outside of it. And so for me, I think those guys looking at me as if I was an equal, as if I was really a coach like them, I think that probably without recognizing it, I wanted to be part of that family. And every time I've tried to get outside of that family, I've realized that I miss it and I want to get back in that family. So I think that was probably it.
That's really good. I think there's something special about the camaraderie that exists in the coaching profession. Only coaches know what coaches go through. And I'm sure spouses figure it out and our family figures it out. But outside of that, people assume they know, but they don't know. And there's a bond that you develop, I think, through the adversity and through the emotional roller coasters that football brings about. It does create a bond. I love the fact when they called you coach, it resonated with you. Right. And that's a cool thing. So let's talk about, you developed over time a coaching philosophy. were there particular coaches that stood out to you that really impacted the way you would coach when you became the offensive coordinator somewhere? If you look back and say, I borrowed a lot from this guy or this guy, or was it a collection of a whole bunch?
Right. Yeah, it was a collection. The first one was my high school football coach, Al Giordano. Um, I think that he made probably as big of impact in my life as any other human that I ever met. And the thing that Coach Giordano did was that, he doesn't go down in history as a Hall of Fame high school football coach in Kentucky or anything like that. But what he did was that he genuinely cared for every player that ever played for him, whether they were a good player or not.
Mm.
He made a difference in their life for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I think that without me even knowing it at the time, is that I wanted to be like him.
Mm.
And I wanted to structure my life, my family life. He had 3 daughters. I ended up having 3 daughters. He cared more about them than anything in the world. I care about my 3 daughters more than anything in the world. I would change anything in my lifestyle in order to be able to be a good dad. And so I think that, I structured myself after him in a lot of ways that I probably didn't realize when I was young. And then as I got older, I think that when I look back and think of the pride that I have of myself as a human, it comes from, having a mentor like Coach Giordano and then trying to model my life after that. The football part, the first guy that really, truly, I think taught me more football than anybody was Billy Mitchell. Billy was a longtime college football coach that, throughout the structure of his coaching career, coached with Jerry Claiborne at Virginia Tech, played for Bear Bryant, was the last guy that Bear Bryant recruited at the University of Kentucky, coached for Fran Kersey at Kentucky for a long time, and then got fired. And so I met him, I knew of him forever because his sister married my dad's brother. So I'd known about him since I was a little kid, but I'd kind of just from afar, I'd idolized him. And then in 1981, after I coached at Owensboro Catholic in 1980, Billy took the head coaching job at Davis County High School in Owensboro, Kentucky. And he offered me a job. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get to work for my idol that I knew since I was a kid. And for the next 2 years, Billy taught me more about overall football than any human I would ever meet. And while working with him, probably the next two influential people in football, Bill Taylor was our defensive coordinator, and I wanted to be Bill Taylor. He was the physical, weightlifting badass that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Players would die for him.
Yeah.
I found out as years went by that a lot of my physical mannerisms on the field of coaching were structured after Bill Taylor. And also at the same time, I met some guy named Steve All that was a sporting good person. And Steve coached our quarterbacks, and he was the first person to really teach me quarterback play that stayed with me. And so really early in my life, those people played as big of influence as anybody had before eventually going to the University of Kentucky and being with Hal Mumme. And then with Hal Mumme, I really learned a structure of the passing game, but the main thing I learned from Hal Mumme was how to conduct a practice.
Yeah.
I think Hal Mumme's genius was in how to practice as much as it was the quote air raid offense. So those were the people that probably influenced my life as much as any.
Man, that's perfect. It's amazing. You obviously, as you get older, like I have done, you start to reflect more as you get older, and you can look
Right.
back at things that are obvious to you now that you can't believe you didn't notice earlier. You said you had mannerisms and people you looked up to, but yeah, I have coaches in my past that influenced me way more than I realized when I first got in the business. And then as I look back, I'm like, holy cow, how did you not see that?
Right.
there. So you had this career at Kentucky, and I talked about the bowl games, and Tim Couch gets drafted. I think you get drafted first, right?
Correct.
By the Cleveland Browns. And then things at Kentucky came to an end.
Right.
And so let's talk about post Kentucky. You author a book. You are out of the game to some extent, but you decide to package this offensive system into what is called now the Tony Franklin system. What was the inspiration? Why did you do that to begin with? What's the origin of that? How did you think of that? Did you think about it for a long time before you did it? How did the Tony Franklin offensive system come about?
Well, I think that there's a great quote, which is desperation creates inspiration. And so when I was out from coaching at the University of Kentucky, it was a controversial ending, which was therefore the book, Fourth Down in Life to Go. And numerous people, powerful people, told me that I would never coach again. They would make sure that I never coached again. And for 5 years, they were right, as far as coaching in college football. And I knew that coaching college football was so much easier than coaching high school football, which is, again, something that people that have not done both don't understand it and don't believe it. They don't understand that a high school football coach gets up at 5 a.m. just like a college coach does. A high school coach has to go pick kids up. He's got to make sure that they're fed. He's got to pick them up, drive them back and forth. He's got to deal with their parents, then go teach 5 classes, then go coach football. And oh, by the way, somewhere in there, make a game plan. Somewhere in there, take a butt chewing from a parent whose 13 JV quarterback didn't get to play enough plays, and, make a lot less money than you're making in college football. So to me, coaching college football was the easiest thing I'd ever done. It was nothing but football, nothing but recruiting. I got to rent a car that I didn't have to pay for. I got to stay in a hotel. I got to fly in airplanes. It was the easy. Oh, by the way, I got to go pick my players and bring back guys who actually could run a route, could catch the football, could do all the things that in high school that you don't take for granted, that you have to teach every little detail about it. And so I was desperate to find a way to stay alive without having to go back and take that really difficult, hard job again of coaching high school football. And not that I didn't love it. I did. I loved high school football. To this day, I have more respect and I have more friends, and I admire more high school coaches than I ever would in college football. There's more good humans that I've met in high school football that have meant more to me, that have changed my life, that have saved my life on more than one occasion. So when I was desperate and trying to figure out a way to make a living, is that was always kind of an entrepreneur in my mind. I studied businesses. I tried different things. Most of them didn't work. And I knew that what Coach Mumme had done at Kentucky was really unique and different. And I wondered, I went to coaching clinics. I'll never forget the first ones I went to, how excited I was to go hear someone like Steve Spurrier speak, and how disappointed I was when I left. How excited I was to go learn some new offensive system, and how disappointed I was when I left. So I said, okay, the market is there for somebody to create something where you would learn an entire system. We were pretty good at Kentucky at throwing the football. We were pretty good at making people excited. What if I could create a system to teach this to high school coaches? And what if I could find a way to make a living doing that? So I basically sent out a letter and said to a bunch of buddies, hey, come to Nashville, and in 3 days, I'm going to teach you the system we ran here at Kentucky. It's going to change your life. And oh, by the way, if it's not the best thing that you've ever had in your life, it's absolutely free. If it does, then you're going to pay me $997. And I think I called it the IRS deal because I owe the IRS money and I'm broke. And if I don't pay them, I'm going to jail. And so I sent that out, and I had 9 buddies, I think, that felt like that they were helping me out. And so they showed up, and that was how it all began. And then over the next 5 years, with me just constantly trying to find a new way to stay alive for another week and not get a quote real job again, and doing everything I could, is that USA Today found out that I was doing this. I had about 65 or 66 clients at the time, and they started an investigation, I think, to kind of expose me. And what they ended up finding was that it was actually working. And so I had $1 million of free advertisement. USA Today did a story, and I ended up the front page of their sports section, a 2-page story about my business. And at the same exact time that that happened, Larry Blakeney offered me the Troy job as an offensive coordinator. And so it was all like magical all at once. And I had begun to do the camps where I taught coaches the system. The camps had started to grow. And the next thing you know, this little overnight business turns into a big deal. You know, hundreds of clients all over the country, making more money than I've ever made in my life, and changing the way that football was played in America. And when I say that, some people go, well, that's really egotistical. Well, here's 2 things. Number one, it's a reality. It did change the way football was played.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't me. It was people like you that went out, took a chance, did something that was really unique and different, started playing with tempo, throwing the ball all over the place, and kicking ass and taking names, winning games, scoring points, winning state championships. And so by doing that, schools across the country that would have never had anything to do with this little old coach from Kentucky that was basically kind of a failure as a head coach himself, didn't really know how to win until I went to Mayfield High School from 1993 to 95, and they taught me how to win, then go to Kentucky and get this passing deal, then combine all of this information together, find a way to teach high school coaches, and those guys take it out and do more than you could ever imagine. And the next thing you know, we're changing the way football is played in America. And these coaches, many of them are doing it better than I could. And they're going out and getting college jobs. And some of those guys today are multimillionaires that are from little small towns like Jeff Traylor, the head coach at UTSA from Gilmer, Texas. You know, he was a great football coach. He calls me up and says, man, I'm averaging, 40 something points a game, but we're having trouble getting over the edge. We're winning 12 games a year, but I can't win the whole thing. What would happen if I learned your stuff? I don't know. Come see. And the rest is history. He goes 16-0 as the leading scoring team in Texas, gets hired at the University of Texas, and today is, making about $4 million a year. Neil Brown is a product of this system that, becomes the head coach eventually at Troy and West Virginia. The offensive coordinator, at Michigan, former, head coach at Troy, small town Alabama high school football coach that blows it up. And not just guys that became, that was Chip Lindsey, not just guys that become college coaches, but high school coaches that go from making $30,000 a year to making $150,000 a year. High school coaching buddy of mine goes from making $50,000 a year to making now $300,000 a year, which is crazy as a high school coach.
Yeah.
So that's the coolest thing about this whole story, is that the lives of so many coaches changed dramatically because of the influence that they were able to have to build their family lives better. And that's the thing that for me that I'm most proud of is, I had success and I was able to have a good life, and I was able to influence so many high school coaches to change their lives. And that's the thing I'm probably the most proud of.
It's funny because, I sat there, I had been a part of 3 turnarounds in high school programs. I came to Mary and I was struggling, 8 wins in 3 years, and nothing was working that I had done before. And I was thinking about either leaving or I'm like you. I was in a desperate situation to do something maybe I normally wouldn't have done. I walked by my mailbox and I found a flyer in there for the Tony Franklin system. And I was intrigued by it, but then I saw one of the recommendations came from a guy named Joe Morris at Mayfield. And I knew him, so I called Joe and he said, yeah, I think it's a great deal, man. He said, it's a lot of good stuff. And we're using a large part of what he's doing. And we've never thrown the ball much. We're kind of a run first team.
Right.
Man, he bragged on you. And I said, well, I got Joe Morris's endorsement. That's all I need. So I decided to stay another year. I set my staff down and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change everything here. And we're going to buy this system and we're going to do it. And so I send the money in. And it was a huge, for me, it was a huge chunk of money. Right. Greatest money I ever spent as a coach in my life. I get the DVDs. We look at them ahead of time. Well, Coach Skeet and I go to the Chicago clinic, got about 20 guys in the room or whatever, and we were shouting out the answers. We were so proud because we had watched the DVDs over and over again. And we started putting the puzzle pieces of the offensive system together. And, you know the story. This was 2005. We went on a 17 straight year playoff run, won 8 conference championships. But that turnaround, Coach, came from the system because it wasn't just an offensive. It wasn't the passing plays.
Sure.
It was everything. It was practice schedules, drills, your terminology. It was a complete system that you offered and every detail. And I think, it's one of those things where I agree with you on something you said. I think a lot of guys, their ego got in the way of saying, I'm going to buy that system because it would look like they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
So they didn't want to say, I need Tony Franklin to teach me anything. The ego can get.
Yeah.
I was desperate. I didn't care whatever you said I was going to do. We went to Owensboro to your camp. We went to Owensboro for 7-on-7. And whatever you said, we just did it. I think that was part of the success we had was we didn't try to take your system
right.
and add our own stuff or manipulate it. You've told that story. Would you would agree that the ones that were successful in this did it like you said to do it?
Right. Yeah. In the beginning, it was a paint by numbers deal and you just had to follow, you had to trust it. You had to believe it. And then you had to follow the plan because the plan worked. And in those days, especially in the beginning, I was more of, look, you do it like this 100% or I don't even want you around. I don't want part-timers. I don't want people that are experimenting. I don't want this. Buy in, do this, practice this way, call it this, all of that stuff. Now, here it is, 25 years later, for me, since I started it, and the game of football has evolved to where that we've got 1 million copycats. I mean, there's 1 million people now doing what I did that have got their little niche in the deal, and defenses adjusted, defenses caught up. Defensive coaches are good too. We would always have a new little wrinkle. Like when we began with what today is called RPOs, we were running RPOs for 4 years before that word existed.
And you told us at the clinic we had about 3 years.
I know it. I said you got about 3 years before everybody in the world does it, because once somebody famous does it, then it'll become the end thing. Well, now the NFL's running RPOs. Now you look on Twitter, and like yesterday I was scrolling through something, and I was watching Kingsbury with the Washington with the RPOs that they were running in the NFL, even though theoretically in the NFL, because you only get 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, you can't do them as well. Well, don't tell Kingsbury that. Don't tell Andy Reid that, because Andy Reid was courageous enough to drop his ego. And today, the coolest thing about what we did, and I say we, all of us high school coaches that did this, all the information flows up. It doesn't flow down anymore.
That's right.
Information came from high school to colleges, then from colleges to the NFL. Now, you've got all these, big shots out there that want to take credit for it and act like they created something, and we're laughing at them because they're doing what we did in 2011, and acting like it's new. We just didn't have fancy words for it. I wish I'd been smart enough to come up with some verbiage for it, to do it. But today, the game is actually, evolving to me almost backwards again, which
Mhm.
is because of all the three-man fronts, all the drop eight stuff, covering up to stop your fast screens, and all the different ways that we screen people, is that I try to wad football back up in a pile again to make everybody come back in so that we can get matchups and one-on-ones, still play fast with tempo, but you have to constantly evolve. And so like what I've had to do in my business is to say, there's all these different answers now. You got to figure out which one fits you the best, but I've got the solutions for you. I've got big sets for how to make sure that you can get one-on-one if you've got one or two decent receivers that you may not ever get them in man coverage if you're four wide or five wide now. So I've had to evolve and adjust in the way that I do things in order to make sure that I help people that face the same things that I face. You know, as a coach, I'm facing the same issues,
Mhm.
to where that I've got to be able to utilize my talent to structure the formation, the tempos, et cetera, in order to evolve to the way that the defenses have answered the things that what used to be easy. I mean, it was easy back in those days when we were playing fast, throwing the ball all the time, throwing screens. Nobody had an answer for it. And then eventually the defenses evolved.
Well, you said it to us at the clinic many times, and you know that there's a defensive coordinator out there right now working to figure this out, and eventually they will. So you have to keep adapting. But
Right.
you know, it's funny because I look back at your quarterbacks, and from Omar Hoganbook to Stockstill to Jared Goff to the young man at La Tech. I mean, you've done it with so many different kinds of
Right.
quarterbacks. That's a tribute to the system because you don't have to have the prototype guy in the system, this triple threat runner passer, you know, or you don't have to have the Tom Brady pocket guy. You can have any kind of quarterback and succeed in this system. And I did it for 17 years with a lot of different dudes. The other thing is high school coaches struggle with offensive linemen. They're
Yeah.
hard. And with this system, I went to it obviously out of desperation, but then I didn't have great offensive linemen. But we end up in the quarterfinals and semifinals in 6 and 7 with offensive lines that were way undersized. I think in 2006 we had two players over 220 on the entire program,
Mm.
and yet we make it to the quarterfinals. And I know it's a tribute to this fact we're spreading the ball around and throwing screens and we're at a time when no one else is doing this. And so it gave us this huge advantage. And then I think the tempo. It's funny. I got to tell you a quick story. After the Super Bowl one year, I think it was the Patriots and maybe the Seahawks game. I can't remember. I brought my kids into the film room and I put up highlights of the Super Bowl. And we saw a pat and go throw. We saw a perfect drill throw. We saw shallow. We saw mesh. We saw so many. We saw outside zone. We saw, and I was doing it to validate what we do in practice and
Right.
what we philosophically, because the NFL in the Super Bowl were doing, I think we counted 17 or 18 things that the Tony Franklin system was teaching or taught. And I said, we already knew there was validation, but I wanted our players to see what we're doing. This is what the best in the business are doing. And that's that trickle up, coach. Because
Right.
when I started in 2005, there wasn't any tempo or all this stuff, the screen game that we saw at the pro level, not like there
Right.
is. Tell me about managing, coach. What's the biggest number of clients you had at one time that had purchased the Tony Franklin system?
Oh God, we had, that's a great question. Somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 500 schools at one time. Um, we had at one time, it was interesting, in the state of Alabama, there were 320 or 30 schools that played football, and 85 were clients, paid clients for that year. In Texas at one time, there's like 1,300 schools maybe that played football, and there was like 150 schools that were paid clients at one time. Over the years, it's been interesting to see, people that come up and say, man, I've had your stuff forever and been, doing it for a long time. The problem was they never paid for it.
Really?
And yeah, you had all these people that started bootlegging the tapes
Oh,
and, were getting in and getting access and it was everywhere. And so when Huddle became a tool. I think a couple of things happened. I think that it made it so much easier, so much better to a degree. Um, but it's like anything is that once stuff gets out in the universe, it's shared um, and the more my coaching career kind of escalated, I don't think that there was a period of time where I didn't market as well. I didn't do as good a job of trying to, as if my life depended upon it. And then there were certain places, for example, the last time I was at Louisiana Tech, we weren't able to do camps here. And so that kind of hurt it because the dorms, they didn't have enough dorm space for us to be able to do it. Same thing when I went to Cal. So I think that as the time went by and my career was maybe financially so much better, I probably like anybody else, I didn't work at it as hard. And it took um, I think it took me getting out of coaching again to then began during COVID to go into a different mode of how do I do this now? Because I haven't had a seminar since COVID,
Yeah.
and so I tried to do everything online. And even though the online stuff of me, presentations and all that stuff was good, probably better, it's not the same as being in person. And
No,
so,
yeah, that in-person thing where you're locked in and you're in a room full of guys.
right,
Yeah, you're with your coaching staff. I mean, there's some
right.
coach. Listen, I went to clinics for years and years, and there was never this will go down as the greatest clinic system in the history of football because you go to a clinic like you said, and some speakers don't. They tell you some, they don't tell you everything.
Right,
They're protecting what they do. There's a disappointment maybe. Well, I don't. It's great, but I don't run that.
right,
Would walk into that Opryland Hotel and you knew for 3 days that everything that was spoken by yourself and by your
right,
staff and by the guest speakers was something that you could use when you got home.
right,
And I think I say that because there's never been a clinic like that where you could use 100% of what was being said. And I heard people say, "Oh, he does this." I heard this last year. I heard it the year before, and I'm like, "That's part of the genius of it, coach."
right.
Hearing it again and getting that affirmation and not forgetting I love that about it. I thought that's what made it special.
Yeah, the in-person thing I think is something that I lost track of after COVID, and thinking that I could move everything online, which again, there's a lot of advantages to
Sure.
having the online stuff. And like I did the first year after COVID, I did something called 365, where every single day of the year I
Yeah.
did a Zoom. And obviously, that can be extremely helpful, but there's still something to being around a group of guys spending that time together, walking through conversations, having those things together that I think everybody looked forward to, and I looked forward to it. And so it's something I've looked into again. The timing this year wasn't right, but I'm hoping to maybe begin again, maybe in January or February after this season. And I think the other thing is for me getting back in coaching and having um, all new video that is, me recreating again these things that I do, even though I've done it with clients. Like the last year that before I got back into this, I did a game planning deal, which I spent all week long working for about 13 or 14 schools that I was game planning for those schools. I was recreating a new thing. And then physically, I went back to the old days of 2001, 2002. I was physically going to locations and coaching again. And I did that for the last, 4 years before getting back. Number one, because I needed it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to be around young people. I needed to be around young people. And so I went and physically did that. And then the last year, I had schools that hired me to do like I used to do, which I physically went to their location, sometimes helped them on game night and would be there to say, hey, run this right now. You're going to score a touchdown, you
Yeah.
know? And so that was a lot of fun for me. And then I was fortunate that this thing at Louisiana Tech happened and I was able to get back in it again.
I think one of the things that an offshoot of this, you're getting all the plays, you're getting the practice schedules, the drills. I mean, it's laid out there for you. Then the expertise, and the two things I think. Also, this system allows you to train your coaches, and
Right,
is a profound impact on a coaching staff when these resources were available to make your coaches better.
right,
Consequently, the other thing is they're created an offshoot of all this was the creation of a network of coaches within. We were all system guys.
right,
Mark Grounds and Jeremy Claudefelder and different people. We could call each other and we could talk and
right.
share ideas, and I love the fact that developed, and it created friendships and relationships for many years where we could share. But I think that was one of those offshoots I didn't expect, I didn't see, but man, it had a huge impact. Even some of the guys down in Kentucky and John Edge and some others that I could
Mhm.
reach out to if I had a question. I want to share this too, Coach. I don't know how you guys kept up with this, but I broke down my film every week. And then I took film of my opponents and I would send it off to your people. And I would get back what they thought. They
Right.
look at our opponents coming up and they would say, hey, here's what I think would be. And I loved it because it may be something I hadn't thought of, but a lot of times it was validation. And that's what I needed. Am I on the right track? And you or your staff would come back and say, run this, and this, I think would be good. And I could say, like, we had that in. We knew it was the
Sure.
ball. I think that was a big part, Coach.
Yeah, that was there was a time when the business was good enough that I could hire full-time people, and those full-time people would do that. I've obviously, when I was coaching, couldn't do it, but I had phenomenal people. As a matter of fact, everybody remembers Donnie Walker from the early days, and being in this business with me, and Donnie did a phenomenal job. Was a great football coach and a really good human being, and that lasted until around 2016, and he went his way, and then I had Tyler Boyles, who
Yeah.
is now the chief assistant to the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh,
And yeah, so Tyler was somebody that played in this offense in high school, then worked for me as a GA. Then I hired him full time while he was coaching with me at middle to do game planning for people week by week. And I had more compliments from him and his ideas. And obviously, the brain that he had was the same brain that then allowed him to get into the NFL and now to become the chief assistant to the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So it's pretty cool.
the Texas thing, when you got into Texas, I felt
Yeah.
really exploded. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was weird because, here's a high school coach from Kentucky that goes and gets a couple of guys from Texas. And you go back and think about it, Randy Jackson, Rodney Webb were probably two of the first ones, Aaron Beck. And those guys go on to be the legends in Texas high school football. Randy Jackson was one of those guys that had one of our great testimonials of, my
Yep.
wife and I got a $40,000 pay raise because of this. And Randy goes from this little small high school, Lone Oak High School in Texas, to becoming one of the most successful Texas high school coaches, getting the best paying jobs in the state of Texas, and then eventually retiring and doing his own thing. Aaron Beck, one of the most successful private schools in Texas with All Saints. This year, they were one of my clients that did our game planning deal and went 14-0, averaged 50 points a game. Just had a phenomenal season. Rodney Webb ends up becoming one of the most successful coaches in Texas, getting the best jobs in Texas, and becomes president of the Texas High School Football Coaches Association, the most powerful position in all of Texas football. And those were the initial guys in the state of Texas. And oh, yeah, by the way, Jeff Traylor coming up. And so many guys in the state of Texas having that success, Canadian high school, winning so many state championships in out there, and over and over again, these same guys. And then it just spread like wildfire. And that probably did as much to change football because of the power of the Texas high school football coaches. And eventually, because all of these guys are now running this offense and using the best players to play quarterback, that literally changed the way football was played. Because these guys, you think about um, Gainesville High School in Georgia, winning state championship and having a quarterback that ends up being, a successful quarterback at Clemson and then becoming the highest paid quarterback in all of the NFL. So, I mean, showing that these guys could run this offense, it transitions into college, then transitions into the NFL. And then, Jared becoming the quarterback that he's become in the NFL, I think has been a huge deal too, just from the standpoint that, we've had, like you said, every type of quarterback that
Yeah.
can rush for 1,000 yards or could throw for 4,000 or, throw for 3,000 and run for 1,000.
Well, I remember, our philosophies of coaching quarterbacks are very similar. I used to say that lots of guys know more about quarterback coaching than I do, but I can teach them how to run this offense.
Exactly. Yeah.
I pride myself in that, and I, I was telling someone, Omar at Troy did not have the prettiest throwing motion, but
Right.
you didn't let that interfere with the fact that he was Player of the Year, I think, twice. I mean,
Right.
it can be a little unnatural or unsophisticated, but if it works, it works. And I think the system allows it to work for a lot of people. And I want to say this too. The success rate of the schools in the system is just phenomenal. But I also want you to remember that you took a lot of average or below average programs, coach, and you made them competitive. They may not have won a state title, but man, they were
Right.
competing with big dogs. They might have been a small school in a big conference, but your system allowed them to compete week after week in a way they never could before. And I've had a lot of those coaches in my network say, we went, we had won 2 games in 5 years or whatever, and now we're winning 6, 7 games a year. We can't get past some of those private schools or big dogs, but hey, we're in game,
Yeah.
we're never in. That's a big deal.
Yeah, we had a client in Alabama that one of the early success stories was the first time and only time I think in Alabama high school football history to go from 0-10 to 10-0. I
Wow. Yeah.
mean, which is crazy, and those were the cool stories of guys that change a community, because football means so much to communities and how people feel about themselves. And, it's funny, you mentioned Joe Morris. You think about the success, Joe following, his father and Coach Paul Leahy, the hardest job in the world to follow them. Now imagine this. You follow Paul Leahy and your dad. So you follow two Hall of Fame coaches in the state of Kentucky. There's no way in the world that you can be as successful as them. But Joe goes to the shotgun, runs our stuff along with power football, outdoes his dad and Coach Leahy, and goes to the National High School Hall of Fame, wins 7 state championships. Mind blowing, what he's able to do. And it just goes to show that, coaching matters. It makes a difference. Having fun, adjusting as time goes on, doing something that you think can't be done in that area, in that particular community. And, throughout the United States of America, we've got story after story after story after story of coaches that have not just enhanced their life, but enhanced the lives of so many people in their communities. And like you said, built a family and a network of people to where we're all able to stay in touch. And, my best friends throughout the United States are guys that I met through this, by doing this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you talk about Joe, and Joe knew how to take your system and make that work at a place where change was difficult to to do when there's an expectation we've always done it this way, and he was able to navigate bringing in a spread system into a place that had been a wishbone power offense.
Right,
That's a huge deal, and I think that's a tribute to his ability to kind of ease that in and be smart about it
right.
and then he made it work, and then nobody would argue with that success. But
Yeah.
um, you know, the producer of this podcast, Ross Swinford, is a big Rams fan, and I'm going to have to ask you about Jared Goff, or he may not edit this thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when the system comes in. You're out at Cal. This is the biggest job so far, and you're at Cal. What did you see in Jared Goff when you started him as a freshman? What did you see in him that said, "Man, this kid could be special"?
Well, the first thing is that, his high school film was good. When we saw the film, we thought he was a really good player. We didn't know if he was great, but we thought he was good. He was really well coached in high school. His high school football coach was phenomenal. Um, and but when I thought he was going to be special, I went to the state championship game. So they're playing in the state championship game, but against a team that was twice as good as them. He's getting his brains beat out. They're getting killed, and he is competing like his life depended upon it. His pocket presence, his toughness, his leadership on and off the field, you could see all of that. And so I called Coach Dykes from that game and said, "This kid's special.
Mm,
We got one here." Well, he then had to go in. He graduates early, comes in January. He's got to go in and beat out a room full of four guys that were all 30, 40, 50 scholarship offers, and Jared had two.
mm,
He comes in and, this gangly 6'4.5" kid that weighs about 170 pounds when he walks in the door, who's not a runner, but he is just a pure thrower of the football that is extremely tough and has incredible feet. He had the typewriter Peyton Manning footwork before we started working with him, and then
mm.
we made it better. And
Yeah.
so it fit the way that I teach a QB. He had already been taught. And so that made it an easier transition. He was physically tough. He came from a family where his father had played 9 years of minor league baseball, going in buses all over the world, never making it in the bigs, got a couple of call ups and couldn't hit the curveball, never made it. Mom, a phenomenal human being, hard work ethic. And he was just a tough sucker, man, that
Yeah.
liked to play the game and was the ultimate teammate. Never asked about stats, never looked at a stat line, only cared about winning, and being the best teammate that he could be. So, it was early on that I thought he had a chance to be special. And obviously, I didn't know he was that good. I remember when Mel Kiper listed him as a top 10 NFL possibility going into his third season. I'm like, really? He's that good? And I didn't know that.
I used to stay up late and watch West Coast games, so I got to see a lot of Cal games. Watch you coach, and I remember seeing him as a freshman, and just he got better and better and better. And you're right, that toughness showed, and man, I enjoyed watching that development over time, coach. And another feather in your cap to have someone get drafted number one and be a part of your system and program, and then go on to what he's doing right now in the NFL and for the Lions right now is really special. I mean,
Well, I tell our guys the really neat thing about Jared is that it hasn't been easy. You're the number one pick in the draft.
yeah,
You go to a horrible team, in my opinion, that was horribly coached. I watched him. I was at practice one of the first days he was there. I looked at my wife. We happened to be in Laguna Beach, and they were practicing in Southern California. I went and watched, and I looked at her, and I watched one of the drills they were doing with the QBs, and I said, "This is going to be horrible." I mean, they were doing some of the dumbest stuff I've ever seen in my life. And thank God they fired him at the end of the year.
yeah,
McVay comes in,
yeah,
and it's a great combination until it wasn't. You
yeah,
know, you kind of forget where you came from. Um, McVay does a phenomenal job. They go to the Super Bowl, but McVay gets his butt handed to him by Belichick. He's embarrassed, blames Jared, and then he becomes the scapegoat when they don't go back to the Super Bowl the next year. He throws him under the bus. And I had conversations with Jared as this is going on, tell him I believe he's going to get traded. We had that conversation. He does get traded. I had a Zoom call with him actually before that. and tried to talk to him about some things that I saw that I felt like could make him better. And then he gets traded. I tell him it's the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And, I don't think at the time he probably believed that, but it has been the best thing to ever happen to him. He gets very fortunate to go to a guy who believed in him. The general manager believes in him, comes from the Rams. He believed in Jared. He knew he wasn't done. Dan Campbell believes in him. And even though they have those rough periods, they never waver from their belief. Well, there's
Yeah.
nothing better than having someone believe in you when everything isn't going great. McVay believed in him when everything was great, took all the credit for it, and then when it went bad, blamed Jared. Campbell took all the blame for everything until it was good, gave all the credit to Jared when it was good. That's what true leadership is. And so Jared knows that he's very fortunate to be with a really good human being in a really good franchise that's done everything right. And, he's finally being rewarded. And the coolest thing about Jared is that he's three times been the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for
Yeah.
two different franchises, which is the highest award in football, which is the do good, no repay system that we've tried to influence upon all of our players, all of our coaches over a long period of time, which is to try to do good for other humans in a way that they can never repay you. And Jared has been doing that for a long time, so I'm proud of him.
Well, that's a great tribute, Coach. And I got a laugh at the fact that you said getting traded to Detroit was one of the best things that ever happened. Those words have rarely been spoken in the history of
Well,
football.
I told him, I said, you're joining Eminem, man, so nothing could be better.
But it ends up being true because of what Coach Campbell has done and that organization has done. But when you first say going to Detroit's a good thing,
Right.
that's tough for a kid to believe, I'm sure. And boy, it has turned out that way. And I'm proud of him. I love watching him play. He is a tough son of a gun, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. I got to tell you a quick story. In 2006, we made the quarterfinals. We graduated a bunch of guys, but we had Matt Brown, our quarterback, back. So we signed up to go to Troy to camp, and we hop on two yellow buses, and it is so hot, and we're taking two yellow buses to Troy from here. It's about what 9 hours, 8 hours, whatever. We pull off at the Tennessee rest stop, and the kids sprint off that bus to go get into some air conditioning, and they are just dying. It is a hot trip. It was a hot camp, but it was a great camp, and we sweat through things, and so when the season was over, one of my offensive linemen that went to the camp said to me, "You know what the secret to this whole season was?" And he goes, "Number one, what we learned at the Tony Franklin camp in Troy." But he said, "Number two, after that, everything else we could handle." So he said
That's funny.
how hot that was in that bus ride.
Yeah.
We get a kick out of it. But I think it brought a group of guys. No one expected us to go to the semifinals the next.
Right.
And Matt was phenomenal, but we had other good players like Derek Bourne and others. But that experience was great, and your camps were just, I said the clinics were special.
Yeah.
Camps were too, because everything the kids did at camp transferred to what we needed to do in the season. And
Yeah. I wish that I could do those again because uh, no one has ever replicated that, and no one even really tries because they can't. And it was such a cool thing that to have all these different coaches that were doing exactly what we wanted, or else they were fired on the spot. I mean, I was a pain in the butt. Now I was not the easiest guy in the world to work for, but from college coaches to high school coaches that came and worked at camp, somebody taught pat and go better than anybody in the world. Somebody taught screen drill better than anybody in the world. Somebody taught mesh drill better than anybody in the world. And at the end of the 2.5 day circuit and cycle, somebody could walk away and know that they had improved dramatically their chances to win. I had one of those 360 moments, that same year that you came, Lou Marinelli from New Canaan, they flew in like 105 kids. They fly from Connecticut, like to Jacksonville, Florida, get on a bus and drive up. They go back and win the state championship. Lou, will tell you that they won like 11 or 12 or 13 championships since those days. And this past, not this summer, but the summer before, is that Lou calls me up. They'd had a couple of years they hadn't won it. said, "Hey, how much would it cost for you to come up and spend a few days with us? And let's go back in time to those days."
Yeah.
So I went up and kind of redid that at
Ah,
New Canaan, and they go undefeated, win the championship again. And it was just a cool thing of like almost 20 years to the day
yeah.
of coming back, and redoing that thing. So it's fun to see that those things still work and the bonds of keeping these guys together. And I sometimes look back at my business and think, I didn't do a very good job marketing the last 10 years. And I think about guys like yourself, guys get old. I mean, we're talking about 25 years
Yeah.
doing this thing. And
Yeah.
so guys retire. And so I've got to figure out a way to recreate myself and to kind of get back into doing some of that stuff because I do miss the fact of doing those things.
Well, it was special. I know that, and it's. I want to reiterate the fact that I believe you are as impactful a coach has ever coached in this business. That what you brought from those little brown paper bags full of VHS tapes to 8 clients in Nashville to having hundreds of clients. But it isn't just that, it's the explosion of what you were teaching, creeping into the college, back into the college, and then spreading across the country, coach. And then seeing it in the NFL, watching the Super Bowl, and watching so many things happening that were being taught right there at your clinics and camps. It is an incredible legacy that you have, and we're not even into the books you've written, um, the way you've mentored young men to be better people beyond the game, and not just better football players, coach. You had a profound impact on my career. And everywhere you are, I'm rooting for that team, and I'll be following you at Louisiana Tech. And I just appreciate the opportunity to sit down and have you on my podcast. I'm honored to have you here. You are at the top of the game at every level, and we appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you, Kerry. It's been an honor of mine, and I appreciate your friendship over the years, and I appreciate all that you've done as well. And hopefully, we stay in touch a little better.
I hope so too, Coach. And I wish you all the best to you and your family. And let me just close by saying thanks for watching today, and thanks to Coach Franklin for his influence and his impact on my life and my career. I want to thank Ross and Abby. I want to thank Swinford Media, my buddies at Adrenaline. I want to thank my buddies at Marion Plumbing, all those who helped make this possible and help us to shed some light on the real people behind the whistle and behind the coaching name. That the impact they're having is profound on the lives of our young people. And it's just an honor to be a part of this profession and still be a part of it through this podcast. So, Coach, thanks again. I wish you all the best, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Kerry. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.